To welcome you, we would like to invite the President of the TCU, Minister José Múcio Monteiro.
Bom dia a todos.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Excelentíssima senhora,
Your Excellency,
presidente do Tribunal de Contas, minha amiga Ana.
my friend Anna,
Excelentíssimo senhor ministro do Tribunal
Your
de
Excellency,
Contas, amigo Augusto Nardes.
my friend Augusto Nardes,
Senhor presidente da Escola Nacional
Your
de
Excellency,
Administração
the
Pública, ENAP,
President of
de
ENAP, the National School of Public
o
Administration,
secretário de Controle Interno do
the
Junto,
Secretary of Internal Control, Mr. Gustavo,
senhor secretário-geral da Presidência do
the
Tribunal de
General
Contas,
Secretary of the Presidency of the TCU, and Mr. Paulo Vitti, Mr. Minister Ribas Torres, Mr. Fábio Granja, the General Director of this agency, and all the other secretaries, organizers of this very important event, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great joy that I would like to greet all of those present here to the fifth edition or fifth version of the International Seminar on Data Analysis when it comes to public administration. Welcome to you all. For me, it's a great joy to open up this event, whose organization is a fruit of the partnership that the TCU has with the CGU and the National School of Public Administration in API. We also count on the support of the Innovation Network for the public sector, InnovaGov, and also the International Cooperation Agency, the German International Cooperation Agency, the GIZ. On behalf of all of the organizers, I would like to thank you for your presence and to thank those who are following up the event on YouTube. And I would like to greet the foreign participants that are going to have a web link to the simultaneous translation in English. I would also like to mention the delegation, the presence of the delegation, the Latin American organization, Hola CEFs. With representatives of 15 countries, and I truly hope that you're going to have a fruitful events here at the Institute. This seminar aims to promote the sharing of experiences and good practices related to the use of data analysis as an instrument to improve the management and the control of the public government agencies and also public policies. Our society is going through an accelerated process of transformation, not only in Brazil, but all over the world. Nowadays, we have on our hands lots and lots of information, technological resources that boost us to change, innovate, or at least to adjust ourselves to the new times. This reality also applies to the way the public agencies operate and the people who work in them. And this seminar is going to give us the opportunity to get to know important advances that are already working well in other organizations. We know that many people still see this as something that is related to the future, but the fact is that the future is already here, and maybe the benefits are here too. Many are the issues that the government has to face, and the use of data and information and technology is capable of helping us and a lot, and help the country of dealing with its greatest challenges. Many relevant work for our society are developed here at the TCU and in many other public agencies. And ENAP is one of them. But they are not seen by the media, and the society at large does not get to know about them. To be brief,
compartilharei
I'm
apenas
going to
dois
share
dos
only
diversos
two
casos
of
que
the
vivenciamos no
diverse
tribunal
cases
enquanto
that we have gone
otimista
through at the
e
TCU
convencidos
and
de
has
ter
made
mais
us
um
feel
caminho pela frente.
optimistic and have
A nossa
convinced us that
Secretaria
we
de
are on the
Controle
right
Externo
path.
do Trabalho
Our Labor
desenvolveu
External
modelo
Control Secretariat
preditivo para
has developed
classificação
a
de risco
predictive
de fraude
model so that we
em
can
benefício
classify
de
the
dito
risks of fraud
seguro-desemprego,
when it comes to
utilizando
labor
técnicas de
leave
inteligência
or
artificial.
labor
Os
insurance
resultados obtidos pelo
payments.
projeto indicaram
The
que é
results
possível
obtained by this project
selecionar
indicate that it's
critérios e
possible to
priorizar
select
ações que
criteria and
venham a reduzir
prioritize
o risco
actions
de
that are going
pagamento
to
de benefícios
reduce the
irregulares.
risk of payments of irregular benefits.
Outro exemplo de
Another
sucesso é o
example that is
Alice,
very successful was
desenvolvido a
the
partir de
Alice
parceria
robot.
do Tribunal
It
de
was
Contas
built
do Próprio
from a
Federal
partnership between
da
the
União.
TCU and the
Permite aos
CGU,
auditores e
and it
usuários
allows the
próprios do
auditors
parceiro
and the users
serem
of the
informados
agencies
sobre
being
indícios de
informed
irregularidades
of
e licitações de
irregularities in
altas
public
e
biddings
pregões no
and
mesmo
also
dia da
public
sua
notices
publicação.
on the same day
E
they
hoje
are published. And
está em andamento o
nowadays,
projeto Alice
we're
Nacional,
now implementing the
feito
National
em
Alice
conjunto com tribunais
project,
de contas
and
dos
it's
estados
done
e
by the
municípios
state
e
TCU,
estenderá sua aplicação
the
quase
state
à
and
totalidade do
municipal
Brasil.
audit courts, and it's going to
Essas experiências
extend its
demonstram que o uso
application
da
to almost
tecnologia
all
tem
of
o
the
poder
public
de
biddings.
transformar a
So
realidade
these
e
experiences
definir
are
patamares de
going
eficiência.
to transform
Mas isso
realities
acontece
and
somente
redefine
quando ela é utilizada
efficiency
de forma
levels.
inteligente,
But this is only
harmônica,
going to
com a
happen
atuação
when
das
it's used in
pessoas
a
que
smart
inseridas
way, in a
no processo
harmonious way,
de trabalho
and
eficiente.
involving all the people
Além
that
disso,
work with this. Besides
o sucesso
that,
caminha junto com o trabalho
success works
colaborativo
side by
entre
side with
instituições distintas.
cooperation, and that's
A
why we are
parceria
here.
ativa
An
multiplica
active partnership
possibilidades e
multiplies the
concretiza
possibilities
potenciais
and
intrínsecos das ferramentas
concretizes
tecnológicas.
intrinsic
Por isso mesmo, esse
potentials of
seminário que é
technological
gratuito e
tools.
colaborativo é
That's
uma
why the
oportunidade
seminar
para
that is
disseminar
free
nossas
and
melhores práticas
collaborative is a
e
way to
compartilhar
disseminate
nossas
our best
experiências e
practices,
resultados
share
que
experiences
muitas
and
vezes
results that
contemplam
many
esforços
times
e
they
problemas
encompass
parecidos
the
e
efforts
potências
and
resolvidos.
similar problems, and
Nesse evento
they
serão
found
apresentados
a common
diversos
solution.
casos
During this event,
nacionais e
many cases are
internacionais
going to be
de
presented
uso
to us,
efetivo da
both national
tecnologia
and
em
international,
prol
and
do
the
bom
effective use
funcionamento
of
do Estado.
technology so that the governments can
Reuniremos aqui
work
palestrantes de mais
effectively.
de 20
We
diferentes
have
instituições,
speakers from over
das quais
20
destaco
different
nossos convidados
organizations,
especiais,
and I would like to highlight the
os
following.
bombeiros militares de Minas
The
Gerais,
Fire Department of the state of Minas
que
Gerais,
demonstrará como a
and they are
análise de
going to
dados foi
show with
utilizada
data
para
analysis
facilitar a
how it was
localização das
used to
vítimas
facilitate
do
the
rompimento das
location
barragens de
of the
Brumadinho.
victims of
O laboratório CAIMA de Israel
the dam breaking in
falará
Brumadinho,
a
and also
respeito da
the
modelagem
Caima laboratory
comportamental
from
do
Israel.
desenvolvimento
They're
de
going to
políticas
talk
de
about
infraestrutura.
how
Espero
better to design
que
public
será útil
policies
nesse
based
hoje
on
e aproveite a
behavioral
programação e na
modeling.
seguinte.
Please enjoy
Interajam,
the program
criem
and interact
conexões
with one
que
another,
permitirão
create
tornar mais
connections that
efetivo
are going
e
to allow
competitivo o trabalho de
you to
vocês.
make your work more effective.
Acredito
I
que a
believe
formulação de
that the
soluções
creation of
inovadoras por meio
innovative
de
solutions
tecnologia
via
é
technology is
imprescindível para a
essential
evolução e
for the
aperfeiçoamento
evolution
das
and
administrações
improvement
públicas.
of the public
Precisamos
agencies.
desenvolver
We need to
novas
develop
formas
new
de atuar,
ways to work,
sempre com o objetivo de
always
melhor
aiming
atender
at
à necessidade do cidadão.
better meeting the
Se
demands of
assim
our
o fizermos,
citizens.
estou
And if
certo
we do this, I'm
contribuiremos
sure that
para
we're
uma
going to
sociedade
contribute to have
melhor
a
e mais
fairer
justa,
society
a
and a
dita
better
sociedade que nós
society,
sonhamos tanto.
and
Muito obrigado.
a society we dream of. Thank you very much and welcome to all.
Convidamos para compor o palco juntamente com o presidente
So now we
José
would
Luiz
like
Monteiro,
to invite
o
onto the
senhor
stage
presidente da Escola
the
Nacional
president
de
of the National
Administração
School of
Pública,
Public
Diogo
Administration,
Godinho Ramos
Mr.
Costa.
Diogo Godinho Ramos Costa.
Convidamos também
We
o
would also like to
secretário
invite the Federal
federal de Controle
Secretary
Interno
of
Adjunto
Internal
da
Control
Controladoria Geral da
of the
União,
CGU,
Gustavo de
Mr.
Queiroz
Gustavo de
Chaves.
Queiroz Chaves.
Tem a palavra o
I would like
secretário
to pass the
federal de
floor
Controle Interno
to the
Adjunto
Federal
da
Secretary
Controladoria Geral da
of
União,
Internal
Gustavo
Control
de
of
Queiroz
the
Chaves.
Office of the Comptroller General, Mr. Gustavo de Queiroz Chaves. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to greet Your Excellency, the President of the TCU, Mr. José Múcio, and I would also like to greet Minister Ana Reis, Mr. Nardes, and all the other authorities present here today. And I would also like to greet all of the speakers, all of the participants of this international seminar. So the words mentioned by the president of the TCU, they reflect how important this event is from a public perspective and for those who already work with data analysis, so that our society and our government can benefit from this. Mainly the TCU, the CGU, and receiving the support of our National School of Public Administration, ENAP. In order not to repeat how relevant technology is and the impact it has in the reinvention of our governments, we also have the need to see the way you can use these new technologies, the professional zeal that is always going to be important when it comes to the publications, when it comes to the use of data sciences. I'm going to try to explain myself a little better. Every time we use models so that we can make our decision-making, we are going to understand the relevance and the limitations of the data. And this is very important. It's important for us as researchers and also users of data science tools to make decisions, to decide everything in a very comprehensive way. Because many times decisions on how to allocate, how to use public policies, they're going to be made based on predictive models, forecasting models, that to a certain extent, they need the entire amount of information. When it comes to control, usually we see the need of analyzing decisions made based on the results. So we do that after the policy is implemented. And the information is extremely important when we take into consideration our legal framework that we have at the federal level. And we have Law 3655. And it is worried that sanctions, punishments, fines based on wrong decisions, they must be deep when it comes to the liability and responsibility of those involved. And so I would just like to add all of the points mentioned by President José Múcio. The tools very important. The tools are very important. So the data science tools are needed. We need to reinforce the use of these tools so that the researchers and the people who work with this, they can bring to us comprehensive information with all of the limitations, but as completely as possible, because sometimes the people who make the decisions, they are not the ones using the tools, but they need information to make correct decisions, to avoid making incorrect decisions based on incomplete information. I would like to greet all of the organizers of this event. I would like to greet all of the organizations that support this event. And as it has already been said by many researchers, we are now working with a new petrol or new oil. So the federal government and the state government and the municipal government, they have the greatest and largest databases in Brazil, and we need to bring this information to the federal level. And so I would like to congratulate the organizers of the event. I believe that this event is going to more and more bring to the discussion of new tools, innovations that are going to be able to improve the public management, and also how we can invest our public resources better and invest it in the Brazilian society. I congratulate you all. Have a good event and have a wonderful success on these 3 days to create partnerships, to establish synergy, to make connections, and thank you very much.
Now we hand the floor to the President of the National School for Public Administration, Diogo Gondinho Ramos Costa. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to greet Minister Múcio and Secretary Gustavo Chaves, also greeting Ms. Jahaz. It is for us at ENAP a great opportunity to participate in this partnership and talk about this discussion, this heated discussion regarding the impact of data analysis in the public service. Increasingly, we see that the strength of new technologies is not something for us to look at the future, but also for us to understand and adapt to it in the present. In 2004, a Dutch photographer, Jan Benning, he took a series of photographs called Bureaucracy. He went to dozens of countries, taking photographs of bureaucrats in their offices, civil servants in their offices, and it was interesting to see that then, in that time, we could see the effect of digital transformation, since places such as India, where they have basically a person, a pen, a stamp, and a piece of paper, and until the UK or Australia, where you could see less paper and more computer screens and laptops. One of the most visible effects of digital transformation is the digitalization, to remove paper and to use screens and pixels. The second, it's less visible but it's more sensitive, is the automation. It's when the work of that bureaucrat who is stamping, using his stamps, becomes an online process, and this work is done by the machine, not a human being. And the third one is when you see that bureaucrat and that function that was repetitive, systematized, and scalable is completely done by computers. So the profile of the bureaucrat changes. It's not just someone who makes stamps. It's a decision-making person and provider of services. In this transformation, we see increasingly the capacity-building work, and that presents itself as a helper of the public service to bring capacity to the civil servant of the future, the person who will have new abilities and will perform new roles. When you look at the technology panorama that will affect all that is in fact the activities, we have to look at that really carefully. The effects are still unseen, unpredictable. We were looking at the natural language processing. It's one of the topics of the panels at GPT-2, and something that I read about it, and not only reading about that, but we also have a query, and then the language generates a poem or a cake recipe or the results for a soccer game or a story in the style of a certain writer. But one of the things that I called my attention was the criticism to the language, that the language was not a better translator than the Google Translate. If I translate from English to French, it's still really poor. But the language programmers, they were surprised because they said that the language was not done for translation. There was nothing to teach the language to translate. When it was requested to translate, as they put thousands of books and encyclopedia texts, books, and they had translations from English to French, and they went to those examples, and from those examples they tried to generate a new translation. One of the most impressive things of this new context that we live today is our lack of capacity to foresee the results that will be generated by this. And then countries that are in the peak of the digital transformation, in the activities of control and prevention against risks, they have new measures that are extremely important. Recently we see in Singapore, and one of the measures that they were really proud of was the new guidelines for the use of algorithms in the public service, transparent algorithms, and algorithms that are understandable to the population, for them to understand that they are not governed by black boxes, but in fact to understand the purpose of the technology in their lives. So increasingly we see this role that has to be performed by the Brazilian state, for the government to go through the digital translation, and has rates of productivity and effectivity for the citizen, and also to be understandable, to be transparent, to be perceived by the common citizen as something that adds value to them. In Japan, for example, they use algorithms for the health sector, in which the population accepts this use of algorithms for decision-making processes, as long as they understand that they know that above the machine there's a human being there that will be able to tackle any problem that may happen. The civil servant will be able to make these decisions in the future as well, and we can count on an app, Our School, for capacity building towards digital transformation and data analysis, even programs that we're having, such as the boot camp, that provide information regarding programming, so that this new world will not be a black box for the citizens and for the civil servant. An app is at your disposal, and congratulations for this event. Have a great event. In this moment, we close the opening panel. We will ask the members of this panel to occupy their seats on the first row of this auditorium, so we can continue our program.
Senhoras e senhores,
ladies and gentlemen, we would like to have your attention now to watch the institutional video of the Federal Court of Accounts. Any space, a new possibility. Organizational learning, information management and knowledge management, research and innovation, cultural management, planned and modern facilities, specialized library, open to the public. continuing enhancement of the external control and public administration, development of technical competences, personal skills and leadership, post-graduation, public services, free courses and listed courses, capacity building, collaborative constructions, high studies center, culture, art, society, Federal Court of Accounts.
Para darmos andamento às atividades,
To continue the activities,
convidamos o
we would like to
secretário
invite
de
the
Informações para o Controle Externo do Tribunal de Contas,
the
Wesley
Secretary for
que fará a apresentação
External
do
Control of
projeto
Information
oficina
of TCU, Wesley Vaz. He will provide the seminar of workshops and general organization of the event. Good morning again. Are you awake? I know it's Monday, so please let's wake up. Thank you so much for everyone who is here, for everyone who is watching this presentation on YouTube. Around 200 people online. I would like to thank our foreign delegation. We have representatives of 15 countries. Welcome to Brasilia. I would like to thank especially the ones who are here and who provided some type of research work for this Congress. Without these works, we cannot carry out this Congress. And for the ones who didn't have their presentation selected, I would like to thank you anyway. This seminar is absolutely collaborative. Without collaboration, we just cannot do it. And today we are completing 5 years. So I will speak really briefly important things on how the 3 next days are going to work. First, regarding the content, today and tomorrow we're going to have lectures in this auditorium, 20 lectures in the total. On Wednesday, we're going to have 6 workshops that will be carried out in the environment of the Institute. There's an important question that has been asked from many people from how to subscribe in the workshops since the subscriptions are closed. We changed our organization compared to last year to improve the sensibility of the workshops, and today at 1 p.m. the link for subscription in the workshops will be available. Obviously the workshops are limited and the vacancies tend to finish quickly. But most importantly, if you have a vacancy in the workshop, you must be at the door of the room of the workshop up to 15 minutes before the workshop. If you're not there 15 minutes before, we're going to call people in the waiting list. Is that clear? All right. Regarding the breaks, in the 2 days, the 2 first days, we're going to have coffee breaks in the afternoon shift, and in the lunch breaks, we're going to have the traditional food trucks outside. We'll take the chance that the weather is really pleasant, really cool. We have tables in the shades, so we can enjoy the weather of Brasilia this year. If you're not from Brasilia, please drink water, hydrate yourselves, because we are in a desert climate in this time of year especially. The moment that we stop, I would like you to enjoy what's most important of this seminar, which is the talking, exchanges, meet people, get to know their works, exchange ideas on what they're doing, because this will be, I repeat, the greatest benefit of this work. So I spoke of the content, and it's important to highlight regarding the content that parallel to this seminar, we're going to have the gel control week from our Latin American friends. So they will be present in some part of the seminar, and at the same time they will have their own activities. Regarding, I spoke of the content, about the breaks, and now I will talk about to giving equal opportunity for the ones who are here and the ones who are on YouTube. We're going to receive the questions only through Twitter, Brazil, hashtag Brazil Digital. This is how you can send your question to Twitter, and the organization of the event will verify the question and provide them to the speakers. The morning lectures will be different from the other ones. We have 2 lectures, and the questions will be done at the end of the lectures. In the afternoon, we're going to have the format of panel. All right? I would like to reinforce my gratitude for you to be here, for us reaching the 5th year of this event. And also I'd like to highlight that, unfortunately, we don't live a moment of celebration. As Minister Lucio said, we are living a tax crisis in Brazil, and this crisis demands creative solutions to have efficiency, effectiveness, and impact in the Brazilian state. It is absolutely necessary. I think that everyone who is here believes that the use of data analysis techniques can produce analysis and products, why not, that will help in this efficiency and effectiveness. That's what we believe. But just to complicate the story a little bit, besides the crisis period we're living a moment of transition, of transformation, as our dear friends from CGU mentioned. So because of that, I think that the role of the professionals who work with data and information and technology needs to be valued and revised. Ladies and gentlemen, in this seminar, as the other seminars, real cases will be presented, and I really would like that we would question the speakers of the effective results of their works, because that's what matters. Many times, the ones who work with information, we are messengers of things that nobody understands. Do you agree with that? How many of you had to speak to your clients and you couldn't communicate very well because they don't understand your language? We, the ones who work with data, we have a great challenge in this moment, which is to try to produce something with impact, considering the fact that, as the president of ENAP mentioned, not everything that we produce is perfect and intelligible for the ones who are going to use it. Sometimes you have to be ambassadors of bad news, such as this information that you use to make decisions doesn't have necessary quality. This that you always believe to be true is not true. Well, how can we deal with this? I dare to say that maybe the ones who work with data, we need to develop the technical competences, but also other competences, and I will mention 2 of them. The first one, the resilience and the courage to keep insisting on producing cutting-edge technology to help our institutions. And this group, it brings comfort for us because we are on the same boat. Second, our humility to understand that many times the response of our algorithms and our problems are not with us. They are with our clients who do not understand what we're saying. And third and last, our sense of ethics and commitment to somehow try to protect that which is our input, protect personal information of Brazilians. Your algorithm must work really well and have access to everything. We are near the action of a law of data protection, and we need to maintain that. We need to keep this right. So there is a lot of work apart from developing machine models or extracting data and provide them to the organizations. Your fundamental work must not be seen only in the technical bias, but also the responsibility of the ones who will perform this work, protect information, and produce the information, the technology that will have a better impact to the organizations.
So there was an analogy that data is the new oil or petroleum. I don't like this analogy too much. It was an analogy done by a British person that data is the new water, and he tries to justify what? It must be fresh, it must be clean, it is in the center of our lives, and it has to be as abundant and clean as possible. That's why I put this video here behind me. That's why I believe that we have to change our perspective when it comes to what do we truly understand as data analysis in the federal governments or in the government. So when we talk about public agencies, try to make abundant what is lacking, try to make relevant what was hidden, try to make simple what was absolutely complicated. And I believe that this is one of the essential challenges that we have, and all of us who deal with data, we face these challenges. So I'm very happy to be here today, because now I'm going to invite onto the stage, well, I'm going to call Brazilian heroes onto the stage. Yes, people. So they appeared on the media as heroes, and they dealt with one of the major tragedies that happened in Brazil and shocked all of us. It was when the dam in Brumadinho broke up and destroyed rivers and the environment in cities. And they're going to explain how in the middle of chaos, they used what they had within their reach to use to try to save people in a real situation, and they didn't solve the loss problem, but they helped some families. So I would like to invite onto the stage, and I would like a round of applause for them, Colonel Elon Dias and also Lieutenant Fernandes from the Fire Department of the state of Minas Gerais.
Bom dia a todos e a todas.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. For us, from the Military Fire Department of Minas Gerais, it's a great honor to be here. My name is Colonel Botelho, and here is Diego. Lieutenant is going to give his presentation after me. On behalf of our organization, thank you for the invitation. It's a great honor to be here to share a little bit with you what we are going through, because the tragedy hasn't ended yet. This is the 134th day of rescue and search and rescue now in Minas Gerais. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you to the organizers of the event. And I truly hope to be able to share this experience with you that we're going to divide in two moments. First, we're going to talk about the strategies that permeate our operation, and Diego is going to discuss the data that for us, we have been learning every single day, and we have been learning a lot. Allow me to stand, okay? Because for me it's better. You can see me better, but visually you know that you can see me, even in the dark, because of this orange, this bright orange, right? So lately, I have been talking a lot about Brumadinho because since the 25th of January, in the first 40 days, I was there every other day, and every Thursday I go there so that we can revise our strategies. And so I am the head of the fire department, and we review and revise all of the processes. And so yesterday and the day before yesterday, we were surprised with the fact that is very bad for us. Usually our presentations about Brumadinho, we always pay homage to the victims. And yesterday morning, I was calling a team of firemen in the Amazon. They are fighting against the fires there. They are helping our friends from the army, and we were talking about security and safety. And when I was traveling from Belo Horizonte to Brasilia, we received terrible news here in Brasilia. Yesterday, soldier Marizelli died, and she was fighting the fires here in the forest. And as Wesley said, it's not only Brasilia. Minas Gerais is burning up, Brasilia is burning up, and I have a dichotomy now, and I'm trying to explain. I don't know if I want rains or no rains, because if there is rain, the fires go down, but if there is rain, the operations in Brumadinho are totally compromised. So I have this dichotomy in my mind now. So, and I have a picture of Marizelli and a few minutes of silence to pay homage to our colleague that died during her job. And no, she's going to help us from heaven now.
Agradeço a todos.
Thank you very much for this. And so I'm going to talk about the strategies for the Brumadinho operation. So nowadays, our biggest goal are these 21 pictures on the screen. 21 pieces of jewelry, jewels. Every Wednesday we meet with their families. They don't call them victims, they call them the jewels. So the jewels are the 21 objectives that we still need to achieve. So 21 people are still missing, or they must be identified. And so if we think about percentage, many tragedies that we have seen and we have observed, so the number of people who are found after they die is about 80%. That's the average rate. And when it comes to statistics, 80% is really high. We have already found 92% of the victims, but our main objective is finding the 21 people that are still missing. This is our main goal, this is our main focus, and we have to try to find them in the time that we still have. And so I'm going to contextualize the situation for you. And this has been teaching to us everything that is different from one incident to the other. So this is a river. This river is called Feijão River. And so it shows how the dam broke up. And so it was under the dam. It didn't give any warning. The risk of that dam was considered very low, but it happened. And so we needed to sue this phenomenon. What happened? So on the 25th of January, it broke, it exploded or was damaged, and so we got there, we implemented our command and control center, and at the first moment it was very complex, and so the main idea I got in touch with our aerial command and I said, what is the scenario? Well, we have an aircraft, it flew over, so the dam burst and it destroyed everything that belonged to the company called Vale. And so we didn't know how many people, we didn't know, and this was the situation there. This was the situation. I'm going to try to show. On the right-hand side, you have the dam that burst, yes? And way there on the left-hand side, we have a water dam that is intact. And it even offered risks during the entire time. It was a water dam. And walking to the effluent dam, it always showed to us that it was unstable. And then where you have here the effluents, the waste here, and then it fell, and then it destroyed the entire structure of the Vale company. And these are technical information that the company shared with us. The dam that burst, and so there was a construction of, it was a construction of 1976. It was a pretty old dam, and so we had many improvements. And so what are these improvements or extra construction? And so the tailings increase, and they had constructions so that the dam could hold the tailings behind the main wall of the dam. But they weren't able to do that. And okay, so the size of the head of the crest of the dam, and this was the biggest challenge for us. And one of the things that have been changing, mainly from other events, and I would like to mention this, Mariana, Brumadinho is totally different from Mariana in terms of the tailing characteristics, in terms of the actions, in terms of the terrain, the region, everything that you can imagine was different from Mariana. So the tailings and the waste, it was denser, heavier, and we needed to assemble these places. We created a control and operation center inside a church near the Feijão stream, and so also in a college. In college, we used to maintain or hold our strategic meetings. And basically, we had this scenario. So the dam burst, and 10 kilometers was the waste, and the tailings ran for 10 kilometers. And so since it was very dense, it stopped right here. This is the reality. So the waste got all of the administrative offices of Vale, the cafeterias, it went to the settlements, and now there's only a sign there because everything was destroyed. And then they created backwater there, backwater. And so I don't know if you can see it. There is a blue line here, and the blue line is a stream. It's a body of water that came and damaging our efforts, hurting our efforts, and is still compromising our search and rescue operations. So this is the reality, and so we developed our first strategy. What was the first thing? So search everywhere, be it with airplanes, aircraft, on foot. And so the area that you saw on the previous slide, it was completely searched superficially. And so on the crest, we had over 30 aircraft flying over, landing, taking off, okay, in the Confins airport. And we had more of landings and takeoffs than any other situation. So 630 firefighters, over 30 aircraft. We used small boats because the area was very imperfect, it was complicated, volunteers. So everybody wanted to go into the hot zone, and so it was important for us. And so we had to operate with the armed forces, and so the military firefighters, they were responsible for the hot zone, that stain that I showed you with all of the waste and tailings, and the other stakeholders outside the hot zone, okay? Machines only in on simple operations or something that we had to do focal in a special place, yeah? And so we had many government agencies. We had Israeli forces helping us there. And so many people ask me, was it effective? The situation of Israel is a little different, but it was very important for us, mainly when it came to the technology and the planning that they have. And this week we had a conference with all of the Israeli delegation to discuss the good points and the bad points. So this was the first strategy. So this was our reality. Everything was liquid and the dogs were almost totally ineffective now, and this is in operation with the Israeli forces. We did what we could at that time, and this was the initial phase. After 20 days, well, between 20 and 40 days, we already had the second strategy. We diminished the number of firefighters. We started using search dogs, and then we started searching for victims on foot. And over 15 states in Brazil, they lent their dogs to us. And so it was not only a work of Minas Gerais, one aircraft, and we started using machines in specific places. And so we analyzed some constructions because we needed some intervention to carry out our operations. And so this is the scenario now. It's very dry now, as you can see. So this is the scenario that we had at that time. And so we went from a huge saturation moment to a reduction in the number of firefighters. We started using heavy equipment, and what was different? It was the use of search dogs. And these are some pictures. And so between the 40th and the 60th days, what did we notice that was important? So we needed to dig in more specific ways in specific places where the terrain was becoming drier. So we started using trucks and equipment. So we reduced the number of firefighters even more to 130. So the aircraft is not so important now. So we went from 30 aircraft to 14 and then to 1, and this aircraft is there so that we can preserve the fauna, so that we can follow up the animals there. And we started digging in dry areas, and we started using the canine unit. And we went from 10 canine units to 4. Not because we wanted to, no, because we have used all of the dogs in Brazil. We have used all of the dogs in Brazil that are trained to do this kind of search. And I believe we're going to receive some dogs from the state of Paraíba, and they're going to help us out until the end of October. And now we're planning, how are we going to use more canine units, because this is very important, so that we can discard the land that we dig. So using machinery, and there is a company responsible for this machinery. And so Vale, the company, would offer us the machinery and we would use it. We started using amphibious machines, because even with this drought, there are many areas that are flooded. And so we have to use amphibious equipment. And after strategy number 3, we are going to discuss something, and Diego is going to use this. We're going to use operational intelligence. We're going to get the data that we inserted into our systems, and we're going to create maps so that we can establish new strategies. So these are the multi-criteria maps. We got data from cell phones, where some bodies were found, radio frequencies, and we overlapped everything. Those who work with planning, and Diego is one of them, and we started determining, okay, the darker areas are areas that are more interesting for us, and I'm going to have a more effective search there. So that was the idea. And then we started developing the 4th strategy, that is search by depth. And so if it's 13 or 14 meters of tailings deep, And so, differently from Bento Rodrigues and Mariana, and on Google you can find the tailings, they came through and they covered houses and cars. And so the density of these tailings took everything to other places, and we started finding them. So the main idea was to stabilize the number of firefighters. We have 138 firefighters, one aircraft, and 111 machines or equipment working at specific places. So this was strategy number 4, and 4 K9 units. And it remains the same. And so after day 60, we started moving forward. But some effectiveness was brought to us, happened. But this concerns me. And this is the reality further on, that we have to have integrated work with the Civil Police Department. So we had a meeting at the coroner's office to understand, look, this is what we're finding. We're finding bodies, we're finding segments, and is this being effective? We were finding many segments or fragments of bodies, but they were re-identifications. So we had people who were cut into pieces, and we found fragments of these people. And so this was rework. I'm not saying that this is not important, okay? But we needed to be more effective. And so I like to show this slide for the following reason.
Above all that we know, and history shows this important dichotomy, it is the average of drought season in Minas Gerais. We have characteristic there is either we have rain or we have drought. So the firefighters work in the floods and in the fires in vegetation. In the end of July, from the end of July until November, they are the drought months. That's great. So we have until November to work in Brumadinho with reasonable easiness. Then we got the pluviometers that are installed in Brumadinho, and we realized that in the past 20 years, historically, in Brumadinho, it rains 1 month before. So what was 13, 14, 15 of November, it's actually 13, 14, 15 of October. So we would have 2-3 months, but actually we're going to have 1 month. So we need to intensify our work. This is our reality. So the rainy seasons, as I mentioned, it comes with this doubt in our minds. How can we advance? How can we go ahead? And more than 1 month ago, we developed the 5th strategy, and we are still on it. We are working on it, especially with some issues that were presented to us in that moment, which is the data that we collected through the teams that went to the field, and we had a little notion of the situation. It is an analysis that we'll have to go through a refining process, but us, we who are working directly in the field, we don't have enough time to wait for certain data to be improved to make decisions. I will not speak empirically, but the way the data was shown, we realized that 92.36%, more or less, in what was registered were bodies or parts of bodies up to this depth, 3 meters, and almost the totality of it up to 6 meters. So the surge that until that moment was of depth, and our time is running. We are working. We're going to work for 1 month without rain to disturb the work. So we needed to scan the place that was not explored to improve the quality of what was found. So we started redefining the strategies. We used the same number of firefighters, the same number of fronts. However, we used several machines and excavation up to 3 meters. So the areas that had not been explored, we explored them. So the quality of what was found for identification improved, and however, it unfortunately didn't bring any new identification. But as soon as we started this strategy, it was even in the news, it was, I think, on August 30th, we identified 7 months later a body that was practically entire. It just didn't have a leg, but it had the head. So this brought us the motivation, more motivation to have the definition of the strategies. So this is the K9 team. It is, yeah, we have a deficiency in the state, and we are even thinking of asking for other countries to help us on this. So this is the current strategy, and what do we have here? We have 130 firefighters working daily. It is also a staff of 30 officers, and punctual excavations of up to 3 meters of depth in large areas. So these clear light areas are the ones that have not been scanned down to 3 meters from our team. So especially here, near the city of Brumadinho, this part here is Brumadinho, so near the community, and they would demand us a lot for this work, we started to do excavations here, finding body parts, and the quality of the search was better. We had more re-identification than identifications themselves. So this is the strategy that we've been using until today. We will complete 8 months of service without a deadline for finishing. Even when it starts raining, we're going to continue working. We're just going to realign the strategy. So if we have a specific technical situation that prevents us from work, and then we will stop. But if not, we will continue. So this is the end of my situation. This is the end of my presentation. This is the current situation. We have 305 located people, a total of 270 casualties, and 21 to be located. We are in the process of maturing of this strategy, and certainly in the next days it will provide us some security on keeping the work during the rainy season. So this is the strategic part. This is what we experience on a weekly basis. And I'd like to thank all the states that offered help to us. It has been an extremely exhaustive work, and a work that we need to focus on safety in other aspects such as health and structures. And just to wrap up, I would say that the firefighters work there until 21 days. They cannot be that longer to that because of the exposition to the tailings. In Minas Gerais, we had so far 2,500 firefighters from the state of Minas Gerais, and there are other 400 from other states. So the total personnel would be 6,000 people who have already worked. But our priority now is to find the 21 missing people and solve this problem. So this is the first part of our presentation. I tried to go quickly because Diego is also going to speak to you, and he will bring information regarding the data. And then we're going to be available for questions and anything that can be presented. Thank you so much. How are you, everyone? My name is Diego. I'm a lieutenant of the firefighter department. We will talk about the data analysis itself. Well, many strategies were created, and many of them were based in data analysis. I will talk about three specific ones which I worked in. As Coronel said, we have a rotation regime to avoid contact with tailings, and including the planning area and the management of the operation. So the first one we will discuss is the estimated depth. I will talk about a map that we call a map of projections and the map of heat. Initially, I bring this and the heat map. Here you can see the region after being reached by the tailing. So this is the before and after photograph. So this brings us the idea of thinking of the estimated depth of tailings could be an important data in the moment of designing strategies. Other whys on treating the estimated depth of tailings. That would be the most efficient operation for the heavy machinery and the rotating regime. We have more information on the terrain we're working at, and you have to remember that we have 20 fronts with 3, 4 digging machines and 6 or 7 trucks. So it's really important to have the estimated depth of tailings. Apart from that, we understood that to generate this data could bring more information that will be used to help make decisions and create newer strategies. How do we carry out this depth estimate? We have 2 topograph maps, 2 with level curves, and before the breaking of the dams, and another one that would be the most recent possible, and we overlap these 2 maps. So looking at the level curves as a compound, we use the intersection of these curves to estimate the depth of the tailings. So the altitude of the most recent map minus the altitude of the map prior to the breaking of the dam. So analyzing the curve levels, we would be able to have an estimation of the depth of the tailings. Initially, we had these 2 maps in that data mining, and we generated a file to Google Earth. So the officers in field, they had a cell phone with GPS, and they could see both level curves, and of course they had a training to be able to identify both curves, to see the intersection of them and calculate the estimated depth of tailings. After that, to facilitate the handling of the tool, we started using the collector for ArcGIS. It is a more professional tool. The image is a little too light, but it adapts the amount of points to the zoom that you give. So you still have the GPS localization in the map. Every 3 meters, they would have 1 point in which they identify the estimated depth of tailings in each location. From this, we started to expand the use of the tool. Instead of having only the estimated depth of tailings, we also included in ArcGIS Collector more information to have better access to the command of the operation. So if you are in field or outside the field, the commanders had access to a whole array of information. Of maps, of Google Maps, for example, we have over 2,000 points distributed in several layers. So we organize the information to have a better access and to make it easier for decision making. Now let's talk about one of the tools we created, which was the map called Projections. We tried to use a large array of information regarding the victims that were still missing to create a map that would help us generate more information to determine the areas of more probability of success. So initially, how did we do this database? This database was one of the most was the most complex database of the operation. It had a very large pre-work, interviews with military personnel and other data sources, such as one of the most different information that we received was the position of the printers, the time that the worker of Vale do Rio Doce company asked to print certain information in a printer. So from this, we could suppose an initial position in the beginning of the disaster. It had several data inputs that generated hundreds of pages that were condensed in this map called projections. And apart from this report, the map received more information. So what was our result? What is this map projections? Basically, we have a map that has the final position of people that possessed the same initial position of the victims that were missing. So victims that we already found and parts of bodies of these victims, we had their final position. So we associated which of these body parts had the same initial position of victims that were still missing. Okay, so let's start talking about the map, literally a map, to generate more probability to find victims. This is the great challenge. We didn't have a theoretical reference, and I invite you all to support us in that matter. To use probability, stronger theoretical reference, to say that in a certain place you would have more probability to find a victim. Given in a scenario like this with so many victims, it is rare. Another goal of the heat map is to optimize the placement of resources in the terrain. So two objectives that are connected to each other. First one, to understand where we would have more probability to find victims, and the second one is to be able to place the resources in a way to use this information properly. Before talking about the first criteria of this heat map, I think it's important to open a parenthesis. And the Coronel showed the multi-criteria map that was used as an inspiration for the creation of the heat map. In this multi-criteria map, many data, pieces of data were presented, certain 900, around 900 points, and in the point of view of case study, it has a lot of information and it is very interesting. But unfortunately, it was made on May 22nd, and it was not really being effective, bringing the desired effects that we expected from the way it was built. So the heat map came as a different proposal, to have fewer criteria. Instead of having a multi-criteria map with many points, the proposal was to select criteria that would be more relevant for our research. So what we used as a criteria initially was recently found body parts in the time that when the map was made, so around 25 days. I think the map was from June 26th. The second criteria is, besides selecting the most recent body parts, we would give different weights to these body parts. The ones that were found up to 10 days, the ones that were found in 20 days, so we would give a higher weight for the ones that were found more recently. And the last criteria was exactly to use the projection map, the map of the missing people, the map of the final position of the missing victims, the map of the final position of victims that had the same initial position as the missing victims. So that was the idea. 2 points that the assumption that we are making this map is that if two bodies were in the same place before the breaking of the dam, after the breaking, if you find one, the zone around it, around him or her, would be the possibility of finding the other person. So this is our product. It is the heat map generated using this criteria. What is interesting about this map is that in comparison to the multi-criteria map, it really prioritized a region. Can I have the laser point? This region was prioritized compared to the former map, the multi-criteria map, in the absolute and in the relative way. The remaining of the map was less prioritized, and this region here was more prioritized in the map. In this region, 7 days after the implementation of this heat map, we found one body in the region that was prioritized, and the body of August 30 was also in this region.
So let's continue talking about the results of this heat map. So we had a reduction in the number of bodies that we were finding throughout the months because of the nature of the operation. So initially you would find the bodies on the surface, and then you started needing backhoes and machinery, so it became more difficult to find the bodies. And from March we found 17 bodies, in April 6, in May we only found one body, June only one, and so we were reducing the number of bodies found, and this was a natural process. But right after the implementation of the heat map, we found 3 victims within 15 days, and we were just finding 1 victim a month in average before this heat map. And so, of course, we understand that this heat map is not perfect. I really enjoyed the presentation that was given before, showing that all of the strategies are limited when it comes to data analysis. And here are the proposals to optimize the tool that we are using already. One of the proposals, respecting its assumptions, is to constantly update it. So as this heat map was implemented using only the most recent body parts, and that we should only use it with the most recent body parts. So ignore some of the past ones and add new body parts that are going to have a higher weight here on the map. Something else we need to update is the weights, the weighting. So the body parts that had a higher weight, as time went by, it's going to have a lower weight until it disappears completely from the map. And the body parts of these projections. So thank God we are finding the victims. So every time we find a victim, the victims that were related to that person, they are going to be removed from the projections map so that it can be fed once again into the heat map. And so the optimization of the heat map, we have been using GPS so that we can already analyze the area that we have covered and searched. So what are we doing nowadays? Every time we go to a certain place, So we are working in 20 different fronts, and we have backhoes, we have machinery, we have trucks. So every time we excavate a certain place, the leader is going to go there and use the GPS to mark the area that he worked on that day. So the main idea is to use this kind of information in the area that has already been searched. It's going to be inversely proportional to the weight of that area. And so the areas that we have already visited and we didn't find any body parts, it's going to have lower priority than the areas that have not been visited yet and for example, the area that was visited many times, it's going to have a lower weight in our heat map. And this is basically the idea behind the implementation of the GPS. And so, just to wrap up, I would just like to mention this is an unprecedented operation. So it's extremely complex. It's an extremely large area, and I thank God because 92% of the victims have been found, even though we have only explored 10% of the tailings. But I'm sure that we can still use data analysis, strategies, and there's no doubt in my mind that in such an operation, it's important to have multidisciplinary teams so that we can develop this kind of work. So all of the tools that I mentioned to you, all of them, they had the participation of somebody that was not a firefighter. So for all of those tools, we asked a technician to help us out. And so the trend of a certain demand and the use of software, and they helped us out whenever we requested anything. And for sure, we need more people to use these tools and also to think about the operation, to plan the operation. So in practice, we have 2 or 3 firefighters to analyze the data, to propose strategies to our commanders, and also many times to analyze the data. So you're always trying to improve the collection of data. Sometimes you interview the families yourself. And so the support from data and analysts is essential for us at the moment. So what are we interested in now? And they are very important for us when it comes to the data analysis. We have a wonderful technical team. We need people who are experts in BI, ETL, data warehouse, so that they can collect our information, try to identify patterns, standards, jointly with the firefighters to determine which patterns are going to be more relevant for our search so that we can have better results. And I make my words Wesley's words, that for all of the public managers that are listening to us, that it is essential for you to use data analysis as a base, a foundation for your decision-making process. Analyzing the data, identifying vectors, the professionals who do this, they have to be valued and they must be heard. So I would like to compliment all of those who work with this now here in the audience and who have been working with this for a long time. And it's a great honor to be here speaking to you. Thank you very much for your attention. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have some questions on Twitter, but I'm going to ask some questions. So you called us, and this is very interesting. So I have a question. So these data are available so that people can help you. Are these data public? Are they available? So if we want to create a work team now and we want to start working with this, how can we help you? Well, they're not public. They're not open yet. There is security, data security involved here, but for sure we can work with professionals who are willing to help us out, as we have been doing throughout the operation. So we have many university professors who offered to help out. We have many engineers who work at Vale, the company Vale do Rio Doce. They have been made available to us, and also from their hearts. They have come to us out of the blue, not because they are forced. And we also have consultants. We have a consultant called Priscila from Vale. She lives in Espírito Santo, and she coordinates many consultancy work for many consultancy jobs for Vale, and she has been sharing this data inside the ArcGIS collector, and so she created everything for us. Colonel? Obviously, it's not public yet, but at a certain moment, we're going to make everything public and available. But if you request to us within the complex, within our operations, and so you can do it. You can analyze the data. I don't see any problems. So I have a question. Many people are curious about this, regarding the medical problems that the firefighters have been facing. So share this with us. Well, in the first week, I practically didn't sleep because this is extremely complex. The first idea that we had is what are the heavy metals in these tailings, mercury, etc., etc. So the first time we analyzed, even before 2019, they came to us. We became a little more relaxed. Why? Because we had to pass all of the firefighters through medical exams, medical tests. So all of the firefighters that were in the operation left the operation. They have already done blood tests when they started working there. And the teams that we have there today, they take blood tests at the beginning and when they leave. And so now, what about the other tests? Yes, we had exams that changed. And then a team of doctors from the Ministry of Health and also from a hospital in Belo Horizonte and the military police, they came to the following conclusion, and we have treatment guidelines. And they're going to allow the firefighters to be tested within the next 20 years of their lives. So after doing these tests, he's going to be retested to see if there is an alteration. But the exposure was not acute because we haven't had any cases of military officers showing symptoms that needed to be hospitalized. So there were no heavy metals there, and they were not impacted, and it was not chronic because we didn't have a sequential exposure. And so the limit of 21 days was not established by me. It was established by the medical protocols. So I can place them there for 21 days. Otherwise, he's going to be exposed to risk. So the routine tests that had the final results altered, they're going to be tested every year, all the time, within the next 20 years. And what about the psychological aspects? The same way, the treatment protocol is not only medical, it's psychological and medical protocols. And so we have a member on our team who is a psychologist. So we have the psychological treatments and analysis. And so, this test is very different. And so the military officer is not only doing the test. The military officer is welcomed by the doctor, received by the doctor, and they have psychological follow-up. Diego, I would like to listen from you a little bit more about the technology. So, at the firefighters, did you receive new technology? Did the company, Vale, help you, train you? Because I imagine that after the tragedy, nothing was ready. But from the strategy to the instruments, I would like to listen to you more. How did you acquire the technology that you have been using? One of the main technologies that we are using was the ArcGIS, the creation of maps with many criteria, the creation of several maps, and this was produced by Vale. And so there is a person available to us 24 hours a day, helping us to use the ArcGIS software. And there is another person who helps us with maps. And as a consultant, we have a geotechnician, and she's a consultant. The information, we started adjusting the tool that we had as it was possible. So we started in a very rudimentary way, and this rudimentary way was the most important for us, in my opinion. And we created a map on Google Maps, and we started plotting on the map where we found body parts and victims, and then we separated everything into layers. And so we have over 2,500 points, and this is still the main database that we have to carry out the operation. And so this is our main tool until now in source of data. If you're watching us on YouTube, we have over 300 people connected, so you can share your questions via #BrazilDigital. I wanted to understand a little bit more. So how does the headquarters work? So you talked about information for the decision-making process and also the search and rescue mission. So how does this happen on a daily basis? So every day at the headquarters, do you carry out a balance? Do you give feedback about the data? When do you decide to change the models? So how is the day-to-day operation of the production and analysis of data? So effectively now, we have the strategies. So I have a kernel there, and this kernel is the strategic connection between us and the operations. And we have the operational base, and daily, every morning, we have a briefing. In the afternoon, we have a briefing with all of the information of everything that was noticed, and this is shared with the strategy department. So every Thursday, I go there to the headquarters. We have a strategic meeting and we decide, are we going to continue having this strategy or are we going to change it with all the data that is collected? So I have a meeting with these two kernels. We have advanced in these areas. This is our reality today. And then we define, are we going to maintain this or are we going to change our strategy? And so I have about 140 people to keep the operation working. Basically, that's it. Did you understand it? So, William, I believe he has a question. So, is there preparation so that we can reuse the knowledge, the tools that we acquired and learned in Brumadinho? So, I believe that you're going to become a benchmark for this kind of work, right? Unfortunately. So, are you going to replicate this? Well, we have a huge committee to do a case study. But this case study is only going to take place after the operations are over. But why have we already established who's going to be a member of this committee? Because they have already started taking part in the operations, in the missions, to get to know. So it's continuous learning that we have there. Other Brazilian states, we have taken part in incidents and events. Sorry, we're going to take part in events. We're going to take part in the international firefighter event in Ceará. And so the 15 states that were there in Brumadinho with us, they have been asking us to share, but we haven't had enough time to do that. And so the greatest learning is going to be to do as we did in Mariana, carry out a case study, and then go deeper into that. But Brumadinho is not a common case study because we have several fields of knowledge, several areas, canine units, air analysis, aircraft, the logistics, because we had little experience and now we're going to have more experience, so it's going to be specific. We have many questions. what is the channel that volunteers have to offer help? And I have already another question regarding the costs of these operations. I know that it's being paid for by the state of Minas Gerais. So what are the channels for volunteers? The channels are the official channels, Facebook, getting in touch. We have an entire structure to receive this in the cooperation department and also at the operations base. So a strategic team is going to get in touch with a professional, and then we're going to create the connection. And the other one is costs, the costs. So all of the costs are being paid for by Vale. So everything that we need, and I have been following this up closely since January. Everything we need, Vale provides. So we are not having we don't have any complaints, we haven't been having problems. They have shared with us drones, machinery, everything, the safety equipment for the firefighters. Thank you. And so now, Francisco is asking if at a certain moment, when you were analyzing the data, did you use variables to identify the bodies, correlation studies with variables, the beginning point, the end point? So he's asking about the specific technique.
The theoretical knowledge regarding our analysis is exactly what I'm calling your attention. We used, well, basically how this map was made. I think this is the interesting point here. We had a point, we had a network of 80 meters, and then we had a weight in this point. So it would influence in each part within the map. So it was a point in a range of 80 meters. So with a weight, the weight was varying according to the criteria. The points of the map projections that are exactly the final position of victims that had the same initial position as the missing ones. These points had maximum weight within the heat map. Just to complement, we have seen this work such this, especially regarding the 21 missing people. What are the initial positions in the projection from the moment in which people who were next to them in fragments or body parts that would help us locate them? There are other technical questions. If the firefighters used the cell phone signal of the victims and the IT structure for data processing that you're using. First one, we used the cell phone signals. The multi-criteria map, this point had a very high weight. And regarding the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, at the same time it is simple, it is robust. We had in a devastated location by this, we had the installation of poles that allows us to have internet in most part of that tailings spot. The IT technology, we don't have a cluster or a supercomputer to work on this data. We have several computers, and they were good computers with availability for all the firefighters in the command post. Okay, we are reaching the end of this panel. I have one more technical question before we wrap up. Eric is asking if the models of prediction of fragment positions consider density and size. I think so, right? You made some comments about that. Size and density of the fragment and the tailings. Well, yes, we thought of the size of the tailings and the fragment or body part. We analyzed it in a specific way. We didn't put it in numbers, but in the analysis of the map segment by segment. We had the register of each segment. It certainly is included when we think of a new strategy or when we elaborate suggestion of guidelines for the command. So where it was found, where this body part was found, the type of body part that was found, all this is in our calculations when we decide the most feasible, interesting guideline in that moment. And just to complement, in the past 2 months, maybe this information will help technically in the answer. The civil police changed the classification. What is what we call segment for the body parts? They would call segment. We would call fragment. So we classified by size and the hardness, the difficulty to find it. So we can use an equipment called Lumina to be able to identify these body parts by DNA. So using these strategies, this work has improved, but it's still hard to identify the body parts. Now, I have a suggestion that it is actually a question, but it sounds like a suggestion. How about the availability, the public availability of this data from your research for people that are here and people are watching us on the web? They can offer to assist to your work. So how possible is it to make this data available? Yes, we're going to study that from next Thursday on, and everything that involves the operations, we can make the data public. Well, this is the end of our time, so thank you very much, Lieutenant and Colonel. The ones who are watching you are certainly more proud to be Brazilian, and they are happy to see all the effort they're doing using data analysis techniques and canine units and all that to help the families who lost their beloved ones. Thank you so much. I forgot to mention something in the beginning. We are still here resisting for 5 years. We will create a Telegram group for the seminar because we don't have a room for people in the WhatsApp group. So we're going to generate a QR code for people to enter in this group on Telegram, this new group. I don't know if you saw this, but this year, the American Congress published a law demanding the hiring in each agency, American agency, which is equivalent to our ministries, an officer responsible to understand, to analyze, to collect, to make available the information and make information products that are useful for the agency. So it is mandatory in the U.S. for every agency to have this professional. And why is that? It is clear in this law because the U.S. wants to increase the use of information in the management of public policies. Since the development until the monitoring to the seed, decided things with strong basis. Our guests now, they have this expertise. We will be honored to have the pleasure of the presence of 2 colleagues who come from the Kaiman Lab in Israel regarding data science and behavioral modeling to improve the design of public policies of their country. So I'd like to call to the stage Ilan Katzir and Itay Sisu. Ok, agora vocês podem me ouvir. Olá a todos, eu sou o Itai Cício, eu sou do Cayman Labs. Eu vou falar com vocês hoje sobre dados para o bem. Como podemos melhorar as estatísticas com o estudo de comportamento. Eu vou fazer a primeira parte da nossa apresentação, meu colega vai fazer a segunda parte, o Ilan Kaitsir. Quero agradecer muito ao TCU, CGU e ENAP por ter nos convidado para falar aqui. E estamos realmente empolgados em estar aqui. Muito obrigado também aos bombeiros que falaram antes de nós. Que história fantástica. E vocês tornaram nossa apresentação bem entediante. Mas eu vou tentar fazer uma coisa boa aqui. Vamos começar. Esse aqui é só um roteiro da nossa fala. Dividimos em duas partes. A primeira parte eu vou apresentar a Cayman de forma geral. E depois vamos falar sobre o nosso trabalho, o nosso modelo em mais detalhes. E na segunda parte vamos falar sobre estudos de casos que temos na Cayman com relação a tráfego, educação e cuidados de saúde. Vocês devem estar se perguntando o que é a Cayman. A Cayman é uma empresa privada de Israel, da Duke University, associada à Duke University. Nós aplicamos ferramentas estatísticas de comportamentais para ajudar a tomar decisão e também com base em evidências, soluções com base em evidência, e também usamos tecnologia para a nossa experiência e vamos ter um foco muito grande em desenho para as políticas públicas. Nós trabalhamos com os governos, com projetos de impacto em larga escala. Vocês podem ver que nós temos atuação em vários campos, como tráfego, minimizar a burocracia do governo e outras coisas. Então, a empresa pode ser dividida em 3 seções que trabalham em conjunto. A primeira é a parte de insights comportamentais, que fala sobre as intervenções comportamentais. Isso. E é basicamente isso.
Method part, in charge of the statistical analysis, the data,
pesquisa
and all these kind of things, and the technology and design part in charge of making customized apps, websites, whatever is needed to run our experiment and to create our solutions that we go to the customers with. Okay, so Abraham Lincoln once said, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening my axe," which is to say, invest in your skills and methods. So what I would like to do now is invest a little bit in your skills and methods, hopefully, and hopefully it will be taking me less than 4 hours. Okay, so these are the 5 stages of our behavioral research process. To present it, I will be using a very simplified hypothetical example. So it's important to keep in mind that this is a hypothetical example, not real research. And later on, as I said, Ilan will present some real examples from current ongoing projects in Cayman. So the first stage of our process is the stage that most of you are probably very familiar with, and that's analyzing existing data. So let's assume, for the sake of our problem, that we have a national problem of obesity we want to tackle, and we have some data from the government, and let's say we analyze this data, and we find a negative correlation between education and obesity, okay? So low education predicts obesity to some extent. So there are 2 problems with this kind of information. First of all, we cannot know from this kind of analysis what leads to what, right? So we cannot know whether it is low education that leads to obesity, or is it obesity that leads to low education, or maybe a third variable that creates both of them. Now, the second problem is that even if we had a direction, even let's say that we knew that for some reason low education leads to obesity, then still there are probably more practical ways of treating obesity than by the levels of education, right? So this brings us, well, it's important to say at this point that this is a very simplified hypothetical example, but the general ideas hold in more complicated cases, which is finding predictors in existing data. And this is now bringing us to the second stage, which is actively collecting more data. So this can be done by several ways. For example, through other external sources of data. It could be done by data mining. But what we often like to do is running surveys that help us get a better grasp of the problem. So let's say, for the sake of the example, we ran a survey and we found a positive correlation between fast food consumption and obesity. Furthermore, we found a negative correlation between fast food consumption and education, and this correlation explains or mediates the previous correlation we saw between education and obesity. So now we are at a much better state because, first of all, we have much better predictors of our problem, and also we can start explaining our previously found correlations. However, we're still left with the problem of what causes what. So it could still be the case that obesity actually leads to greater fast food consumption, right? Or it could be the case, as I said before, that a third variable could cause them both and thus create this correlation that we found. For example, we can think of, say, a certain gene that leads to more fat production and also to greater appetite. And this creates the correlation that we see in our data. So in order to find what actually causes obesity, what we need to do is establish a causal relationship. So what is causality? Causality is basically determining the effect of X on Y rather than their mere association. So if you think about it, causality is an extremely important concept in evidence-based policy because it answers exactly what we're interested in, and that's what will be the effect on Y if we intervene and change X in the real world, so not in our data. Or in other words, how do we get Y to change in a certain direction by changing something else? Oh, sorry. So Judea Pearl, one of the fathers of causal analysis, writes in his very recent book, "Causal questions can never be answered from data alone," which is to say, statistics alone is not enough. It's never enough. So in order to infer a causal relationship, you either have to have some assumptions in your model, which can be given, for example, by domain experts, and also you have to use some fancy statistical tools. Or what you could do else is run a randomized control trial. So randomized control trials, or RCTs, are basically experiments where participants are randomly assigned to either a treatment or a control group. The control group is identical in every way to the treatment group, except that they don't get the actual treatment. So this way, every change we see between these two, the results of these two, the two conditions can be attributed to the treatment itself, and thus establish a causal connection between the treatment and the result that we find. So James Lind was the first one to try this all the way up in 1747, where he treated ill sailors who had severe vitamin C deficiency, but they didn't know it back then. He randomly assigned them to control or treatment by lemons, and it actually worked. Okay, so also important to say, as some of you might know, there are other ways of inferring causality, also from observational data, but we're just not going to go into this right now. RCTs, or randomized control trials, are the gold standard of inferring causality in many fields today, such as medicine, psychology, economics, even design. So A/B testing, you can think of it as a form of an RCT. So back to our chubby guy. So now, let's say we have established a causal direction between fast food and obesity. So now we know what causes obesity, at least to a certain extent. Sorry. However, trying to manipulate, trying to lower fast food consumption in general can still be very challenging. So what we might want to do at this point is dig a little bit deeper in search of something better to work with. Okay? And this brings us to stage 4, identifying the mechanism. So basically the idea in this stage is that we are looking for all the possible explanations that can lead from the cause to the effect. All right? So statisticians call these mediators. You can think of these as paths that leads from the cause to the effect. So thinking about our hypothetical example again, let's say we can think of 3 possible explanations of why fast food consumption causes obesity. So one explanation would be the high number of calories in fast food. The second explanation would be the sugary drinks, soda. And the third explanation is through the fat content, so deep fried food, for example. So now we can look in our data and start ruling out some of the explanations, and hopefully we are left with something that mediates the relationship and gives us something to work with. So let's say we're looking in our data and we find that a large number of calories indeed leads to obesity, right? That makes sense. Now, for the sake of the example, let's say we also find that fast food actually doesn't contain more calories than regular food. So we can actually rule that path out. Then we see that fast food does indeed contain a lot more fat than regular food, but we also see, again, for the sake of the example, that fat content is not a major contributor of obesity, which is a real theory, by the way. So now we are left with a third explanation. So we test it in our data and find that indeed fast food consumption is highly correlated with a large amount of soda, of sugary drinks consumption, and this is indeed a major contributor of obesity. So now we have established a whole link between our cause and our effect, and now we have something better to work with. So what we would like to do now is basically try to modify this mechanism, or try to block it, or lessen it in some way. So in the behavioral science, we like to think of every action as composed of motivation and friction. So motivation is basically whatever makes you want to do this action, this behavior. And friction is whatever prevents you from doing it or makes it harder to do. So thinking about soda consumption, this is a behavior we want to reduce. So what we are looking for is to increase friction and decrease motivation. So there are several ways of doing that. Now using this behavioral lens, we can think of classical ways of doing that, such as legislation. So setting rules or banning soda consumption altogether. This would of course add a lot of friction and hopefully reduce soda consumption. This is a somewhat extreme result, extreme solution. But for example, that's what they do in US public schools when they ban selling sugar drinks inside the school. So the second possible solution would be the classical solutions of economists, and that's through incentives. So, for example, we could tax sugary drinks, tax soda drinks, and by that also increase the friction and hopefully decrease the soda consumption. However, in behavioral science, we often like to use much more subtle interventions, okay? So these, for example, could be a nudge, okay? A nudge is like a small push, shove in English. So nudges are basically small changes in the environment designed to change people's behavior for these people's own good. So for example, whether to save more for retirement, eat healthier, get more exercise, these kind of things. So here's an example of a visual nudge. Here we can see stairs painted on an escalator. So to tell people what's the correct place to stand on an escalator, so as not to block it for people who are in a hurry. Now, as Brazilians, you might appreciate this next visual nudge, which is designed to help men aim better when they pee in public toilets. So, to those of you who can see, this is a small soccer field inside a urinary. Okay, now what I want you to notice here is this very strong connection between behavioral science or nudges and design or UX, user experience. So if you think about it, both of them are trying to change the environment so as to help people do the correct choice or make it easier to do. So this leads us to stage 5, the intervention, or trying to modify or change the mechanism that we just found. So again, we want to reduce soda consumption. So let's say we can think of 3 possible interventions, 3 possible treatments. The first one would be to set a small default cup size, right? So default is a very common nudge, and setting a smaller cup size by default, if you think about it now, using the behavioral language you've just learned, is supposed to maybe add some friction, because now you have to, if you want to drink more, you have to specifically ask for a larger cup, maybe pay a little bit more for it, yeah, and maybe go to refill it. These types of things are friction. Second type of treatment we try is giving them a water bottle instead of soda. And again, this is a hypothetical experiment, right? So this allegedly also increases friction because you have to ask to change the water with soda if you want to drink soda. Now notice these are very, very subtle interventions, subtle treatments, and some of you may think that it doesn't really add friction, so it's not really hard to do, but that's part of the idea in nudges. So not to limit anyone's choice, still leaving anyone with every possible choices and not making it really harder, only a little bit harder. And sometimes this is all it takes to get a significant effect. The third treatment we try is by giving them information. So, for example, telling them the amount of sugar inside their drink, printed in bold on their cup. Okay, so let's say we ran an RCT, a randomized control trial, and we test all these 3 interventions together, of course with a control group, where we can compare all the different treatments to. So now remember again that negative is desirable. We want to reduce sugar drink consumption. So for the sake of our example, let's say that 2 of the treatments actually worked in reducing consumption. And the third one, the information didn't do anything, which is, by the way, what we and other people often find in this field, that giving people information about what to do is often not enough. So now what we can do is basically pick the treatment that worked the best on average. However, maybe we can do something even a little bit better. and that's a conditional nudge or conditional intervention. So you could think of this as trying to see whether different interventions worked better on different types of people, different groups of people. So let's say for our example that we find that age moderates both these effects, such as kids react better to the small cup intervention, so they drink less with this type of intervention, whereas adults react better to the water bottle intervention. So what we might do now is make some kind of a tailor-made solution where we decrease the default cup size in children's meals and change the soda with water with adult meals. And this allegedly will get us a better solution, more efficient solution than a one-size-fits-all approach. So to summarize, these are the 5 steps that I've been mentioning. The first step, analyzing existing data, and the second, actively collecting more data and analyzing it as well. And you can think of both these steps as answering the question of what predicts our problem. Then, of course, there is inferring causality, but by whatever method you choose to do that, and then identifying the mechanism. And you can think of both this question as why do we find these correlations that we found in the first 2 steps? And then the final stage of finding the solution or testing the behavior change, which could be thought of as an answer to the question of, how do we get people to change their behavior and for whom? Now, importantly, technology and design are implemented here all along the way by creating customized experiments, more elaborate experiments, and also using design principles, especially in stage 5, to get much stronger and more efficient treatments. So several steps can be performed all at once to save time and money. Some steps can be repeated several times until a satisfactory result is achieved. And some projects can start all the way in step 5 if this is a problem that has been studied before, and all we need is to test it and maybe modify it a little bit. But importantly, you can never assume that whatever worked somewhere else in the world will work on your audience as well. So now Ilan will take it from here. Where are you, Ilan? Oh, here you are. So you want to come up here? Okay. And I will be back here for questions, so don't move. You have it.
Thank you, Itai, and good morning, everyone. My name is Ilan Katsir, and today I'm going to talk about behavioral changes that we have done in our work in Israel. But first, I want to reflect some examples on our own behavior, and I will ask you a few questions. Please be honest. How many of you have ever scheduled an appointment to a doctor and failed to show up? Let's try one more. How many of you came here today using public transport? Not that many. So why? Why people schedule up an appointment to their doctor and fail to show up? Why people don't move to public transport? In Kaima, we take this kind of question and answer them using the model that Itai just presented. In the first project I will talk about, I will focus on steps 1 and 2 and how we can cope with difficult problems that we don't have a lot of information on. Now let's talk about traffic. Traffic congestion is a huge problem in Israel and around the world, as you know. And when we approached this problem in Israel, we had almost no information at all about how people move from one place to another. So we had to start from step number 2, from actively collecting more data. Let's have a look. Itai, are you okay? Okay, So in this case, we analyzed the big industrial park where lots of people come in. We try to figure out what is the landscape and what kind of things can we do. So in the beginning, we decided to use some drones. We tried to figure out how does the congestion happen and what are the challenges on the way to the high-tech park. We used these live videos in order to validate our data. We wanted to be sure that the data we get is not affected by car accidents and stuff like that. Then we analyzed anonymous cellular data, and we saw that there are 85,000 vehicles a day that enter this industrial area. For Israel, it's a lot. That most of them are coming for work commute at 9 o'clock in the morning. And you can see that 9 o'clock in the morning is a really terrible hour. And if we could shift just some of these people's behavior to the left or to the right, we could create a lot of benefit. We also looked on when people leave the industrial area. And it's a bit less concentrated, but it's not a good pattern either. And it's getting worse. Almost 84% of the people commute alone by car, and only 2% commute by bus. So maybe we thought that all of these people who commute alone by car just do it because they live too far away from their work. But unfortunately, this is not the case. You can see here that 30% of the people live up to 5 kilometers from the industrial area and still commute alone by car. 5 kilometers is not a lot of distance. And if you could change just some of these people's behavior, we could create a lot of benefit. So maybe we should take all of this information, put it on a map, and analyze the level of public transportation. And this is exactly what we did. You can see here how we took all of the information that you saw, and we basically analyzed what is the potential for changing behavior and moving to public transport. The greener dots that you see is where the level of public transportation is really high. And the more yellow dots is where the level of public transportation is worse. When we zoom in, we can find a few interesting things. For example, we can see at different levels of public transportation in the same city, in the same neighborhood. And if you think about it, people pay the same price for their properties and they get a total different level of public transportation. We also can see how many people live next to each other and still commute alone by car. So this analysis gave us a few ways to think about how we can design a better transportation system. So first, we can offer a carpool match for people who live next to each other and commute to the same workplace. Second, we can offer shuttles that will take groups of people to the industrial area. And third, after understanding this demand for transportation, we could even create a better bus lines that will take more people to their opportunities. So what we learned from this project? We learned that in complex problems like transportation, there is a huge effort needs to be done in order to collect relevant data that will give us more information about the problem. And before doing it, we cannot create a behavioral change and to plan a better transportation system. Nowadays, we're working with the Ministry of Transportation and Ministry of Finance in Israel on creating an innovative data-based public transportation system that will use anonymous cellular data, maybe some drones, and make a public transportation analysis in order to understand how we can do together a better transportation system. In the next project, I will focus on steps 3, 4, and 5, and I will try to show you how it's important to run in experiments in order to create an evidence-based policy. So in this case, we're trying to get more young people, and especially more young women, to study the scientific majors that would allow them to become computer scientists down the way. Every country wants more science technology, and Israel is not exception. In Israel, we have less than 25% of women in the high-tech sector. So we both try to fix the gender gap and to increase the number of young students who are learning computer science. So first, we looked on the process, on the decision environment. And in Israel, we first choose a major in high school, then we choose an academic degree, and then we choose a career. So naturally, we decided to start from where students choose their degree. And in Israel, we have this SAT test, like you have in Brazil, the ENEM test, that students should do before applying to universities. So we said, why not intervene when these students got their grades, and we gave them information about computer science degree. We measured the results, and we didn't see any effect at all. When we tried to find out why it was not working, it was really interesting to see that it was too late in the process, because girls have a tendency for more human professions already in high school. So they make the actual choice earlier. The next thing we did was to run a survey and to ask young students, why you're not choosing computer science degrees? And the most standard answer we got, it's too difficult. And we saw a big gap between boys and girls' answers. So we thought, how we can cope with this difficulty? Luckily, we have in Israel these computer science light courses. You know, these courses that you say, let's give them a light course, and then everybody will choose computer science. And we were even asked to digitize such platform and give it to everybody. We said fine, but before digitizing and investing a lot of money and effort, we said let's run an experiment to check if it really works. So we picked a few classes, we did a before and after evaluation with a control group, and we measured the results. And guess what? It didn't work. And we didn't believe it. So we ran this experiment again, and we saw again the same results. No effect on the boys, and girls were even less likely to choose computer science. When we tried to find out why it was not working, we understood that girls felt that it was unbelievably boring, they didn't get any sense of success, and they didn't understand why it should be their future profession. But we're a stubborn team. We didn't give up. We went all around the country and we filmed young students and especially young women who learned scientific majors, and we asked them to tell about their daily life at work. For the experiment, we developed a digital platform for choosing a major in high school. In this platform, the students, before they choose their major, they saw our videos. In one of the videos, for example, they saw a young woman who learned computer science and now working in a cool startup, changing the world with more powerful women around her. This girl exactly answered all the barriers that prevent from young girls choosing computer science major in high school. We also use some behavioral principles, like to create an active thinking before choosing the major, and also to reduce the present bias by showing them what is the future potential benefits of this profession. Let's have a look, few seconds of how it looked like. So we worked with the Ministry of Education, and we got access to a lot of classes. And you can see here that the students got to use our platform before they choosing the major. And maybe we're up to something more interesting here, how you can calm down 15 years old teenagers. Just give them cellular phone with our platform. The next thing we did was to perform a causal network analysis to identify the mechanism of choosing a major. Keeping in mind the huge effect of gender on choosing the major, twice as much for boys, it was really interesting to find out there is no direct connection of gender to choosing computer science, which means that we managed to explain the whole effect of gender by the other factors in our model. We also can see how central factor is the level of interest, as it influences many other factors in our model, such as their self-efficacy, that we saw that it was hard for them, that it's difficult, and how they see it as their work in their future. So what we learned from this project? We learned how hard can it be to infer causality and to identify the mechanism that can give us results. And from analyzing the results of this experiment, we saw that there are 20% more young women who are willing to choose computer science majors. 20% more young students and 30% more young women who are willing to choose more computer science. So what we learn? We learn how hard can it be, and this is why it's so important to run an experiment to check what can work. Here we needed a few experiments. These experiments can really lead us to evidence-based policy and for creating a behavioral change. In the next project I will talk about, I will focus on step number 5. In projects where we have a lot of information and academic literature, so we can focus on testing behavior and what can work in our country. The next project is the famous no-show problem. And I'm not talking about dating. In Israel, the no-show rate is about 25%, and it creates huge problems to the healthcare system. A no-show occurs when a patient schedules up an appointment to his doctor and fails to show up, like some of you here. So before we came up, there was this current system that gave people 2 reminders. The first reminder, 5 days before the appointment, and the second reminder, 3 days before the appointment. And the reminder was basically very dry and said, hello, you have a message regarding your medical appointment. To see the appointment details or unsubscribe from the service, click on the attached link. If I would get it, I won't show up. So we approached the system and we tried to use some alternative text, which includes some behavioral principles. So for example, we told them that it's a professional figure message. We told them how much the appointment will cost. We told them that it's a social norm message, that it's a national effort to decrease the no-show. Let's have a look on a few examples and then you will have to vote, so be focused. So the first message is the personal request message that said, hello, this is Ben from the hospital. I wanted to remind you of your scheduled appointment. The second message is the emotional guilt message that said, hello, this is a reminder for a scheduled appointment. A no-show without canceling in advance, delete treatment for patients who need medical aid. Let's have one more. The emotional relatives message from the family that said, hello, this is a reminder for a scheduled appointment. Your family will be happy to know that you are taking care of your health. Now I will ask you to vote. Have an opinion. So who thinks the standard message worked the best? You are good. Okay. Who think the personal request message worked the best? Okay. Who thinks the emotional guilt message from other patients worked the best? Okay, not bad. And who thinks that the emotional message from the family worked the best? Itai, what do you think? Just kidding, you know the answer. So the winner is the emotional guilt message, like most of you raise your hand, so I'm happy. That said that a no-show without canceling in advance delays treatment for patients who need medical aid. And I don't know if this type of solidarity message is typical only to Israel. For example, in England, the message that told about the appointment cost worked better. So here in Brazil, maybe something else can work even better. So you just need to try on your local areas. We ran this experiment on about 160,000 patients, and the good news is that all of our messages worked better from the standard one. And sometimes we wonder, who designed it? It's so easy to do better. You can see that our winner, the emotional guilt message, managed to decrease the no-show rate by about 33%, which helped us to save 400,000 waiting days for the healthcare system. But we didn't stop there. We created a complex AI model that took into account everything we knew about the people. If you remember, in the original experiment, we randomly sent different messages to 8 groups. Here, we analyzed what kind of people reacts better to which message. And let's have a look on a short example. We have here a 39-year-old woman from a middle socioeconomic status with a particular clinical information. The appointment is 19 days from scheduling, and the system observed that she is a chronic no-shower. You can see that our model predicts that the message that will work the best to a person with this specific set of features is the personal request message, and not the emotional guilt message that works better on the average people. By training this AI model, we can get up to 40% in no-show reduction. So what we learned from this project? We learned that the vast majority of the work was to send the right message to everyone. And then we could do a bit more by using this AI personalization model. We also learned how we can motivate people, nudge them to change their behavior in a much better way. Let me just summarize with the following. You can see here Professor Dan Ariely's photo that works with us on all of our researchers. And when all of our world becomes more automated and we have more data, it creates huge challenges. But the good news is that we have come a long way from James Lin's first RCT. We have better tools, so let's use them better. And I really think that behavioral economics and our model can help us do that. It can help us understand how to create attention, what is friction, what motivates people, and how we can redirect their behavior in a much better way. Doing it in the government means we're all committed to better data, better decisions, and better life. Thank you very much.
Please, thank you, thank you. That's it. Great. Nós vamos fazer o painel em inglês aqui, então. Okay, very nice presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I was waiting the Dan Ariely picture, the last slide. Okay.
Okay.
Because your boss, I think, is pretty important to.
You want to see him again?
No, it's not needed. Okay. Okay. We have plenty of questions here, but first of all, I'd like to highlight 2 sentences you've done. You've speak with us. Causal questions can never be answered from data alone, and it's pretty important to emphasize that because we are, you know, I don't know, I don't have any time, so I'd like to describe my problem entirely with the data, and unfortunately, I think it's not possible. I think you agree with that. I'd like to, you know, ask you to speak a little more about that.
All right. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a major problem, and that's the main reason why we rely so heavily on experiments. I think that's part of what makes us different than other, say, consulting company, if I can compare us to these kind of companies. So relying heavily on experiments is probably the best way to go. However, as I mentioned, especially nowadays, there are other ways of inferring causality, and of course, I understand that you can agree that causal connections is what we're interested in. So there are other ways, and the other ways just require you to use much more advanced statistics, because running experiment is very easy. I mean, you really need very basic statistical skills to compare the conditions. If you run something much more advanced, so you could do better also with observational data, which we actually do as well. I mean, the model that Ilan showed about the education, about what leads what, to make people choose a computer science major in high school was done on observational data. So you could do that if you have more fancy statistics and domain experts. So you have to have some assumptions, and that's also an important part. So that's the part of the, I would say, the behavioral insights part in our group, that they are in charge of the behavioral interventions and also the domain experts in each field. So I think that's the way to go, and yeah.
Great, and Ilan said, we need to invest the time to know better the problem and its impact to public. I'd like to ask you if you guys have some kind of special training about communication. How could you communicate better with the public servants and with the citizens about this kind of job with, you know, a lot of inferences, a lot of statistics, but how can you convince your bosses and the public servant to make a try in this case in this kind of techniques?
So maybe a few words about it. When we're working with the government, we see that in many places we have really good people, but one of the most challenging places is that the measurement is not widespread enough. The language of measurement is not there yet. So the first thing that we do in any ministry, we're creating this baseline of data. And when we all can speak this language of data and evidence-based policies, we can really start to make better interventions, better experiments, and to create a better policy for everyone. So the first step is really to understand how we can do a small, like a nudge, but a small change that will help them to map their data better. And in many projects, we start from understanding what is the data that is already there, what we can analyze. Because a lot of ministries, they have many data points, but they're not connecting them together because there are not enough IT persons and data architects in the governments. So this communication, it's really important. It will be based on, of course, on friendship, but also on real data and measurement. So this is what we're trying to do in our project.
I think we were talking about digital literacy. The need the public servant from now, not from the future. You know, just learn a little bit more data and IT and this kind of stuff, I think. Okay, I have a question here from William. He's asking you, well, many of supervised machine learning methods used in industry nowadays has serious ethical pitfalls. He's talking about data bias. The user behavioral aspects can help to eliminate or mitigate these pitfalls of data bias, in your opinion?
Yeah, so what he means by that, I guess that it can create some discrimination where you just use models. I'm not sure what to say about that. I mean, we don't have any project that we tackle the problem of data bias, did we?
I think that what experiments can help in this bias is when you have different groups.
What has it?
Okay, so when we have randomized control trial and we have in the no-show project, we send different messages to different groups of people randomly. So when you're doing that, some of the bias you can reduce the bias by already doing it. So
I also think maybe, well, I'm not sure, but I think data bias problems are more prominent where you have something, you are preventing people from doing something. So for example, law enforcement or encouraging certain groups to get education. But what we do is always focused on giving people what they need in order to change their behavior in a way that will do them good. So I think maybe that's why we don't really tackle problems of data bias because, yeah, I mean, this is more something when you want to prevent people from doing something, I think.
Okay. So we can see our Twitter account There's a question from Eric. What is the next frontier for the application of behavioral economics in government? How to overcome the obstacles?
Okay, so if we think about the last maybe 300 years, we really have overcome all of our physical limitations. Just look on this auditorium, the lights, the chairs, the table. And I really think that in these years, what we're trying to do in CAIMA is to overcome the cognitive limitations and how people make choices, how we can redirect their behavior. And I think that the next thing that we could do is focus on how we can create technologies that will build from scratch on behavioral economics principles. So for example, we got this computer science, how we wanted to get more young girls to choose computer science. The current system is not built on these principles. So first we try to try some existing technologies, and it's really hard. Then we needed to create our own platform that was built from scratch on our principles, on what we learned in our research, or the obstacles and motivations that we found. So if we can create these technologies from the beginning on our principles, I think that it really can help, and I really think that this is one point where we need to go, and maybe the other is to understand how we can scale these solutions. Because, okay, you can create an application, it will work really good, but now you need to implement it for thousands, hundreds of thousands of students in many other systems in Ministry of Education. So it's a huge problem, and we need to think from the beginning on solutions that are scalable. Mm-hmm. In Itai's vision, when we presented our vision, we always think not if something is only behavioral, we also think if we can scale and implement the solution. So if a law needs to be changed, we won't go in this direction. We'll try to go on ways that it's more easier also for the government to implement. So I think it's the next stage.
Yeah, even for that, a question. Did you do a follow-up of the young women in computer science careers, just trying to convince the bosses that, okay, she picked the right course and she's a very successful computer science right now? Did you pick these numbers of the...
So are you asking whether we had a follow-up on this?
Yeah.
Okay,
so the experiment is, we finished the experiment recently.
Okay.
So these girls, they are still young girls. They are in their 11th grade. But it's a good question, because in many of our experiments, we do like the after measurement. Like in transportation, we try to, we checked if we give people personal commuting plan, mm-hmm. We'll give them like the exact information when they need it on their possible route. We wanted to check if they will change their behavior. So then we measure the effect half a year after the experiment, and we still saw the effect. So it's a really important direction that we need to do the measurements also after the experiment.
And we did it in this experiment 3 months after it, only we had a much smaller sample because not everyone was answering. This was sent to them through their cellular phones. It was 9,000 students at the beginning, but then the final stage was only 1,000 students. And we still saw an increase with the group that was assigned to the treatment, the ones who saw the videos, but it was much smaller. So it could be the much lower statistical power, but also what we think is that this effect dissipates. So it's important to give them this information right before they are making the choice. Otherwise, you lose the effect. That's what we see. And the next step would be to run an experiment where they choose their actual choice and just after they see the movie. So that's the next step.
I think your answer is related to the next question. How open are Israeli public officials to experiment with behavioral nudges? What do you attribute this to? We are talking about culture right now, I think.
So it was not easy, but now I think they're really open because we're working more like 3 years with the government, and in many fields like Itai showed to you earlier, transportation and health and digital literacy, and we're working in a huge project on reducing bureaucratic burden, on how we can take a really huge processes and to build them from the beginning on behavioral aspects. So they're really open. We have a lot of collaborations in Israel and like starting a lot of them around the world. So we hope we can do good everywhere we are. So really open.
Okay.
Not ask for more.
Okay. Oh, well, you guys will just give us a pleasure to a workshop on Wednesday from 8 to 12 in 2 days called Bring Your Challenge. I'd like to ask you to speak a little more about this workshop on Wednesday, if you can.
Well, I think
Sorry.
no, that's yeah. The idea there. First of all, I think don't come with such high expectations. We cannot like solve any problem. Like, I don't know, I have problems with my relationship, what I do, my wife is not doing this and that. No, it's really, it's difficult. I think the most of what can we bring, and maybe I'm biased here, is that the work method that can lead you to the correct results, how can you get to them, and maybe some behavioral insights that we can give that help it, but do you think else?
Maybe it's really important to come like with these questions and maybe to think on what is the current behavior? What is the behavior that you want to change? What is the data that you already have? What is the data that you think that you need to collect? So maybe think about the 5 steps that you saw here, and it will help you to get better questions that can really redirect people's behavior.
Yeah, and importantly, this is a long process. I mean, people often think, okay, nudges are really small things that you make in the environment, so it's easy. It's maybe easy to implement and cheap, but it's expensive to study. So you need thousands of participants. You need to invest. You need a lot of knowledge. So this process takes time. Yeah, and in Israel, one of the nice things we had, it's called a Nudgeathon, which is basically several teams from different parts of the government, which came all to a big hall kind of like this, only like flat with tables. Okay. And there was some high-ranking academic professor which went between the tables and helped them, and each team had like 2 people from academics and other people from the government, and each team tried to solve a certain problem, and they followed up on it several months after that. And I think that's a good way, first of all, to connect between academia and government, and also to try solving problems in a larger scale. I think it's a good initiative, and I've heard that you're actually considering to do that here in Brazil as well, so maybe you can help with that.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. I don't know if we have any time, 3 minutes more. Question from Fabiano. Which are the main artificial intelligence techniques have you been used in your projects?
So actually, what we currently do is, I wouldn't call it artificial intelligence. I mean, we use more basic statistical techniques. So the power comes from the randomized control trials, the experiments, things like that. We are getting into more big data, machine learning approaches now. But I would say the most maybe cutting edge techniques that we use are some things that maybe data scientists are less familiar with, and maybe social scientists are more familiar with. That's the field that I'm coming from, such as structural equation modeling. This helps you get the whole mechanism that I shown is more important, and not just try to predict the problem. That's probably the main problem, I would say, with machine learning techniques, which are awesome at doing a lot of things, beat the best player in the world, the best Go player or chess player. But for our specific applications, which is evidence-based policy, where you have to establish causality, you need to go deeper and find the mechanism and use things like causal analysis, network analysis, structural equation modeling, things like that. Yeah.
I'm sorry, running out of time. Let's see our last questions. Bias on behaviors, I think we've pick this question. Is there any data protection law in Israel? If so, how is the consent for data collections without invading professional private deprivations?
Yeah, we have really, privacy laws are really hard in Israel, and this is why I'm trying to show, like in transportation, all the data that we analyze was anonymous. So, and when you think about it, you don't really need the data which is not anonymized. You need to understand behavior of groups of people and how you can create a large impact on large groups. So if you think about transportation or no-show, that you are doing a large experiments, you want to understand what is the change on groups of people. This is why we can work with the privacy laws. We just ask the companies that we work with, like it's large transportation companies, to take out all of the user information and just give us data points. And the data points we even can work with, up to 250 meters, that nobody can tell that we can refer to someone specific. So this is a really important point, and we're really trying to take care of it and not to get any data that we don't need to for our research.
Great. The last. How to learn more about behavioral economics? I know a great book.
You can call it I.
No. Well, there are actually amazing books today. So this is funny. Maybe, I don't know if it's relevant, but I came to this field from a very relevant field. I studied my master's and bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering, and then I came to behavioral economics in my PhD. So obviously you can learn that later in life, and there are really great books. Some of them by Dan Ariely, you should say. He's our boss. No, but there are very good other books. So for example, I would say Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow, is maybe the most inclusive. Yeah, Daniel Kahneman. Behavioral economics, actually, there is the book called Nudge by Sunstein and Thaler, which is also very good and very focused on what we talked about today. And I mean, I probably read all these books, so I can recommend a lot of them. But yeah, Freakonomics is a very good book. Yeah, all the series.
Predictably Rational, right. Maybe.
Yes, yeah. I said all of Dan's book. That's actually what got me into this field, Dan Ariely's books. So.
Great. So I'd like to thank you very much, guys. I'd like to inform you that the soccer field is not a nudge for us anymore because our team is not so good as
that's not right.
But I'd like to Israel. I'd like to thank you very much. Obrigado a todos vocês. I will appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. 14. Horário de volta, 14 horas, nesse mesmo local. Muito obrigado. Food trucks prontos.
So we will be back here at 2 p.m. Okay, the food trucks are ready for you. See you at 2 p.m.